Colonel Leora Vale stood on the observation deck of Iridia's central command station, her gaze fixed on the swirling crimson forests that stretched across the horizon. The black oceans beyond them reflected nothing, absorbing light like a void, even after 15 years on this planet. The stark contrast between the blood-red vegetation and pitch-dark waters still struck her as both beautiful and ominous. "Colonel," a voice called from behind, "the council is assembled and waiting." Leora turned to face her communications officer, nodding curtly. "Tell them I'll be there momentarily." As the officer departed, she allowed herself one last glance at the panorama of her adopted home. The year was 2347, and Iridia, nestled in the Thalassa star system at the galaxy's edge, had maintained its relative isolation for decades. The planet's distance from major trade routes had been both a blessing and a curse, preserving its unique ecosystem but limiting technological advancement and support during crises. And now they faced their greatest crisis yet. She smoothed the front of her navy blue uniform, adorned with the silver insignia of the Iridian Air Force, and made her way to the council chambers. As the commander of Iridia's modest defense fleet and a former diplomatic officer, Leora carried the dual burden of military leadership and interspecies negotiation. Today, that burden felt particularly heavy. The council chamber fell silent as she entered. 8 representatives from Iridia's major settlements sat around a circular table, their expressions ranging from apprehension to outright fear. "Colonel Vale," Council Leader Toran addressed her, his usually steady voice wavering slightly. "What's the latest from our deep space monitoring stations?" Leora activated the holographic display at the center of the table. "Approximately 6 hours ago, our distress signal to the Human Alliance was intercepted and blocked." The hologram showed a red line, their transmission abruptly terminating before reaching the nearest relay station. Shortly after, we detected multiple vessels entering the outer orbital paths around Iridia. The display shifted to show a dozen triangular ships, their metallic surfaces reflecting no light, just like the oceans below. "Vex," someone whispered, the word hanging in the air like a death sentence. "Yes," Leora confirmed. "We've positively identified the fleet as Vex. They've already destroyed 3 of our communications satellites and are systematically establishing a blockade around the planet." Council Leader Toran leaned forward. "The biological anomalies in the eastern forest region were likely advanced scouts," Leora finished for him. "The unusual biological signatures we detected last month weren't natural mutations as we initially thought. They were Vex infiltrators, preparing for this invasion." The revelation sent a ripple of murmurs through the chamber. The Vex were known throughout the galaxy as a parasitic techno-organic species that consumed resources on a planetary scale. Where they passed, only barren husks of worlds remained. "We had hoped," Toran began, then faltered. "The humanitarian aid fleet from Earth was supposed to arrive within the week." "It still might," Leora said, though she kept her tone neutral, unwilling to offer false hope. "But we need to prepare for the possibility that it won't arrive in time, or at all." "What are our options?" asked Representative Mira from the Southern Archipelago, her usually melodic voice now sharp with anxiety. Leora straightened her shoulders. "I've mobilized our flagship and the entire defensive fleet. Our weapons systems are antiquated compared to the Vex, but they're all we have. I'm also requesting emergency authorization to deploy the forbidden weaponry from the secure vault." The chamber erupted in protest. "Nuclear arsenals out of the question," exclaimed Representative Kell, slamming his fist on the table. "Our charter explicitly prohibits their use under any circumstances." "Even in the face of extinction?" Leora challenged, her voice rising above the din. "The charter was written with the luxury of peace. Representative, we no longer have that luxury." Dr. Alan Roth, Her chief science advisor and the leading voice of the peace faction stood up from his observer's seat at the edge of the chamber. "Colonel, with all due respect, there must be another way, perhaps a diplomatic channel. The Vex don't negotiate, Dr. Roth. They consume. They don't want our resources. They want our planet. Every living thing on it will be processed into their biomass or exterminated." Leora's eyes swept the room. "I understand your reservations, but we're out of options and running out of time." A tense silence followed her words. Finally, Torrens spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of his authority. "Colonel Vale, you have temporary emergency powers to deploy all available defenses, including the vault weapons. May the stars forgive us." Leora nodded grimly. "I'll make every shot count." As the council session adjourned, Dr. Roth approached her, his face etched with concern. "Leora, nuclear weapons won't just destroy the Vex. They'll devastate our ecosystem, poison our oceans." "I know the consequences, Alan," she interrupted, using his first name to emphasize their long friendship outside the professional setting. "But I've studied the Vex extensively. Their ships have regenerative capabilities, conventional weapons barely scratch them, and they'll adapt to energy-based attacks after the first volley. We need something that can deliver a decisive blow all at once." "The cost will be less than extinction," she finished firmly. "I don't like it any more than you do, but sometimes survival requires terrible choices." Dr. Roth looked as though he wanted to argue further, but instead sighed deeply. "Just promise me you'll exhaust every other option first." "You have my word," Leora assured him, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder before turning to leave. She had a war to prepare for. Back in the command center, Leora found her longtime friend and wing commander, pilot Jen Ko, already reviewing tactical displays. "How bad?" Jen asked without looking up. "Bad enough that the council authorized the vault," Leora replied, taking her position at the central command console. Jen whistled low. "Never thought I'd see the day. How long until the Vex reach atmospheric entry points?" "At current speed, 18 hours, but they're being methodical, cutting off all our communications first. They know we're isolated out here. No immediate help is coming." Jen's fingers danced across the tactical display, highlighting their defensive positions. "We've got the Sentinel Squadron on high alert, armed with our best anti-ship missiles. The ground-based ion cannons are at full charge. Fleet status shows all 5 vessels combat-ready, though the Defiant has some issues with its shield generators." "It'll have to do," Leora said, studying the display. "We need to coordinate our attacks precisely. The Vex ships communicate with each other, hit one, and the others instantly adapt. Our only advantage is the first strike." "And if that's not enough?" Leora's expression hardened. "Then we use the vault weapons as a last resort." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Civilian populations were evacuated to underground shelters, military personnel took their positions, and the planet's meager defenses were readied for what many believed would be their final stand. Leora had just finished reviewing the deployment of their nuclear arsenal when the command center's alert system blared. She rushed to the main console where Jen was already analyzing incoming data. "Multiple hyperspace signatures detected at the edge of the system," Jen reported, her eyes wide. "Big ones, much larger than the Vex ships." Leora's heart raced. "Identification?" After a tense moment, Jen looked up, a mixture of disbelief and hope on her face. "Human Alliance signatures. It's the Earth Fleet." The command center erupted in cheers, but Leora raised a hand for silence, her military instincts not allowing for premature celebration. "Get me visual confirmation and open a communication channel as soon as they're in range." The main display flickered to life, showing a massive formation of ships emerging from hyperspace. The lead vessels were indeed the expected humanitarian aid ships, their hulls painted white with the universal blue symbol for medical and food supplies. But behind them came something entirely unexpected, a battle fleet of unprecedented size, sleek, angular warships with the unmistakable gray and black markings of Earth's Space Command stretched as far as the sensors could detect. "That's not a humanitarian mission," Leora breathed. "That's an invasion force." "Earth doesn't invade allies," Jen argued, though uncertainty crept into her voice. "They've never brought this kind of firepower for a simple aid mission either," Leora countered, studying the formations with a tactician's eye. "Something's not right." A communication officer called out, "Incoming transmission from the Earth flagship, Colonel." "On screen," Leora commanded, straightening her posture and adopting her diplomatic demeanor. The display changed to show a stern-faced man in the dark blue uniform of an Earth Fleet admiral. His insignia identified him as Admiral Marcus Kane, a name Leora recognized from historical accounts of Earth's conflicts with other species. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Earth Alliance Fleet to Iridian Command. We received your distress signal and have come to render assistance. We are aware of the Vex presence in your system. Stand by for coordinated action." Leora stepped forward. "Admiral Kane, this is Colonel Leora Vale, Iridian Defense Force. We appreciate your response, but we were expecting a humanitarian aid mission, not—" She gestured to the tactical display showing the massive battle fleet. "This—" Kane's expression remained impassive. "Colonel Vale, Earth has a policy of sending appropriate resources to meet the situation. Your distress signal indicated a potential Vex incursion. The Vex are not negotiated with, they are eliminated. The humanitarian ships you were expecting are indeed present, but they will only begin operations after we've neutralized the threat." Leora felt a chill run down her spine at the casual way Kane spoke of elimination. Earth's military reputation was well known throughout the galaxy, efficient, overwhelming, and uncompromising when faced with threats to humanity or its allies. But seeing their doctrine embodied in the armada before her was jarring. "Admiral, we have prepared our own defensive measures." "With all due respect, Colonel," Kane interrupted, "your planetary defenses are woefully inadequate against a Vex fleet of this size. We've encountered them before. They're already adapting to your weapons signatures. Stand down your forces and allow us to handle this." "That's not a request. It's a strong recommendation." Leora bristled at his tone but recognized the truth in his assessment. Iridia's defenses were indeed outmatched. Still, she couldn't simply cede control of her planet's security to an outsider, even an allied one. "We appreciate your assistance, Admiral, but Iridia will participate in its own defense. We request coordination, not subordination." A flicker of what might have been respect crossed Kane's features. "Very well, Colonel. Transmit your defense plans to my tactical officer. We'll incorporate what we can, but be advised, we will use whatever means necessary to eradicate the Vex threat completely. Earth's policy is thorough." The implication hung in the air between them. Earth was known for its scorched earth approach to existential threats, often leaving devastation in the wake of its protection. "Understood, Admiral. Iridia values its people above all else. We seek the minimum collateral damage necessary to ensure our survival." Sometimes, Colonel, what seems excessive in the moment is actually the most humane course in the long run. Kane out. As his image disappeared from the screen, Leora turned to her officers. "Transmit our defense plans as requested, but maintain independent command and control of our forces. I want our nuclear arsenal kept in reserve. We don't deploy unless absolutely necessary." "You don't trust them?" Jen asked quietly. Leora watched the Earth fleet moving into attack formations on the tactical display. "I trust that they'll destroy the Vex. What I'm not sure about is what else they might destroy in the process." The Vex, seemingly aware of the new arrivals, accelerated their approach to Iridia. What had been a methodical advance became a rushed assault, their triangular ships forming attack patterns that Leora recognized from historical records of other invaded worlds. "They're adapting their strategy," she noted. "They know they're outgunned by the Earth fleet and are trying to establish a foothold on the planet before they can be engaged in space." Dr. Roth, who had joined them in the command center, pointed to a cluster of readings on the environmental monitor. "Colonel, we're detecting massive biological changes in the red forest regions where the initial anomalies were found. The Vex are accelerating their conversion process." Leora studied the readings with growing alarm. The unique red flora of Iridia was being transformed at a cellular level, converted into something alien and hostile. If the process continued, the entire ecosystem could be weaponized against them within hours. "We need to target those areas immediately," she decided. "Jean, prepare the Sentinel Squadron for a precision strike on these coordinates." As Jean relayed the orders, a communication officer called out, "Incoming transmission from Admiral Kane." Kane's image appeared once more, this time with a backdrop of a bustling combat information center. "Colonel Vale, our sensors have detected biological conversion processes on your surface. We're preparing to deploy our plasma lance to sterilize the affected areas." Leora felt the blood drain from her face. The plasma lance was Earth's most devastating non-nuclear weapon, a concentrated beam of superheated matter that could literally boil away everything in its path down to bedrock. "Admiral, those areas are near civilian populations. We have our own strike planned with conventional weapons that can contain the spread without such extreme measures." Kane's expression hardened. "Colonel, conventional weapons will only slow the conversion, not stop it. The Vex bioforms are already adapting to your planetary conditions. Every minute we delay gives them more foothold. The plasma lance will ensure complete eradication." "At what cost?" Leora demanded. "Those forests are part of a delicate ecosystem that our people depend on." "Forests can regrow. Colonel, extinct species cannot. We have extensive experience with Vex biological warfare. Once they establish a foothold, the entire planet becomes a weapon. I understand your concern, but this is precisely why Earth developed the plasma lance, to excise threats with surgical precision rather than resorting to nuclear options that would render your entire planet uninhabitable." Leora glanced at Dr. Roth, whose face had gone pale. He nodded almost imperceptibly, a reluctant acknowledgement that Kane's assessment might be correct. "How wide an area would be affected?" she asked, turning back to Kane. "The beam can be focused to a diameter of approximately 5 kilometers. We can target precisely the conversion epicenters with minimal spread to surrounding areas." 5 kilometers still meant the destruction of a significant portion of Iridia's unique ecosystem, but it was indeed less devastating than the nuclear option Leora had been prepared to use herself. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Proceed with your plasma lance, Admiral, but coordinate with our ground forces to ensure all civilians are evacuated from the target zones." "Already in progress, Colonel. We'll begin the operation in 30 minutes. I suggest your forces focus on the Vex ships attempting to breach your atmosphere. We'll handle the ground-based threat." As Kane's transmission ended, Dr. Roth approached Leora, his expression troubled. "The plasma lance will sterilize those areas completely. Nothing will survive, not even microorganisms in the soil." "I know," Leora replied grimly, "but he's right about one thing. If the Vex conversion takes hold, we lose everything, not just 5-kilometer sections of forest." The next hour unfolded in a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. Iridia's defense forces engaged the Vex ships attempting atmospheric entry, while Earth's massive fleet formed a perimeter around the planet, methodically targeting and destroying the alien vessels. From the command center, Leora watched as the first plasma lance deployment began. One of Earth's largest vessels positioned itself in geosynchronous orbit above the primary infection zone. A brilliant blue light gathered at the ship's underside, growing in intensity until it was painful to look at even through the filtered view of the display. Then, a lance of pure energy, a concentrated stream of plasma heated to temperatures that rivaled the surface of a star, streaked down through the atmosphere. When it struck the crimson forest below, the effect was immediate and horrifying. Everything within the beam's path simply ceased to exist. Vaporized instantly, trees, ground, Vex bioforms, all converted to their component atoms in seconds. The beam carved a perfect circle 5 kilometers wide, leaving nothing but a smoking crater where lush forest had stood moments before. Leora watched in silent horror and reluctant awe. The destructive power was beyond anything Iridia possessed, yet it was wielded with a precision that their own nuclear weapons could never achieve. "Second infection zone targeted," reported an Earth fleet officer over the shared tactical channel. "Plasma lance charging." As the terrible weapon fired again, the Vex ships seemed to recognize the threat. 3 of their vessels broke formation and dove toward the Earth ship, controlling the plasma lance, their irregular movements suggesting a desperate suicide attack. "Interceptors, protect that ship," Leora ordered, redirecting her Sentinel squadron. The Iridian fighters, though outmatched in firepower, were nimble and piloted by crews who knew their planet's unusual atmospheric conditions. They harried the Vex ships, disrupting their approach long enough for Earth's own fighters to deliver the killing blows. "Nice flying, Iridians," came the appreciative voice of an Earth squadron leader. "You've got some moves in those antiques." Leora allowed herself a small smile at the backhanded compliment. Perhaps there was room for cooperation after all. The battle continued for hours, with Earth's overwhelming firepower gradually turning the tide. The Vex, realizing they were outmatched, attempted to consolidate their forces around their command ship, a massive hexagonal vessel that had remained at the edge of the system until now. "They're regrouping," Admiral Kane's voice came through the command channel, "preparing for a final push or retreat." Leora studied the tactical display, noting the Vex formation. "Not retreat," she concluded. "Look at their positioning. They're creating a defensive perimeter around the command ship while it powers up its main systems." "Agreed," Kane replied. "Intel suggests they're preparing to deploy their primary weapon, a gravitational distortion device that could tear your planet's crust apart. We can't allow them to complete the charge cycle." "What's your plan?" Leora asked, already dreading the answer. "We're moving our flagship into position to deploy a concentrated barrage from multiple plasma lances simultaneously. It will drain our power reserves, but it should penetrate their shields and destroy the command ship before they can fire." Dr. Roth, who had been quietly monitoring the environmental impacts of the battle, looked up in alarm. A barrage of that magnitude in near-orbital space could create an electromagnetic pulse that would fry every electronic system on the planet's surface. Leora relayed this concern to Kane, who acknowledged it with a grim nod. "We're aware of the potential EMP effect. That's why we're timing this attack to coincide with Iridia's rotation, placing the bulk of your populated areas on the far side of the planet when we fire. There will still be damage, but it should be minimized." It was a calculated risk, sacrificing some areas to save the majority, the kind of cold arithmetic that Earth's military had perfected over centuries of interstellar conflict. "How long until the attack?" Leora asked. 17 minutes. I suggest you power down critical systems and activate whatever EM shielding you have." As the Earth flagship moved into position, Leora ordered emergency protocols throughout Iridia's settlements. Hospitals switched to backup generators. Communication systems were hardened where possible, and the population was advised to shut down all non-essential electronics. In the command center, tension mounted as the countdown approached 0. Leora stood with her officers, watching the massive Earth vessel align itself with the Vex command ship. Blue energy began to gather around the flagship's weapon ports, not just one plasma lance, but a dozen, all charging simultaneously. 10 seconds to firing, came the announcement over the shared channel. Leora found herself holding her breath. Despite all the preparations, the sheer destructive potential about to be unleashed filled her with dread. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Plasma lance barrage deployed. The display automatically dimmed as 12 brilliant beams of energy lanced out from the Earth flagship, converging on the Vex command ship. The alien vessel's shields flared briefly, then collapsed under the onslaught. The concentrated plasma beams pierced the hull, tearing through the massive ship as if it were made of paper. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Vex command ship began to break apart, secondary explosions rippling along its surface as internal systems catastrophically failed. A final, massive detonation consumed what remained, sending a shockwave of energy and debris outward. The command center's displays flickered and died as the electromagnetic pulse washed over them. Emergency lighting activated, casting the room in a dim red glow. "Status report," Leora called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Communications down," reported an officer, switching to hardened backup systems. "Defense grid offline. Environmental monitoring systems rebooting." Gradually, basic systems came back online. The tactical display sputtered back to life, showing the aftermath of the attack. The Vex command ship was gone, reduced to scattered debris. The remaining Vex vessels, suddenly leaderless, moved erratically, some attempting to flee, others continuing to fight without coordination. "Earth Fleet to Iridia Command," Kane's voice crackled through the restored communications. "Target eliminated. We're moving to mop up the remaining Vex ships. How's your status planetside?" "We've lost most electronic systems, but hardened backups are coming online," Leora reported. "Casualty reports are still coming in, but initial assessments suggest minimal loss of life thanks to the evacuation measures." "Good. We'll have engineering teams ready to assist with repairs once the space is secured." Kane out. The battle's conclusion was almost anticlimactic after the spectacle of the plasma lance barrage. Earth's overwhelming firepower methodically destroyed the remaining Vex vessels, hunting down even those attempting to flee the system. As Leora had observed earlier, Earth's policy was indeed thorough. In the days that followed, the true impact of the battle became clear. The areas targeted by the plasma lance were completely sterile, not just devoid of life, but stripped down to base elements, leaving glassy craters where forests had once stood. The electromagnetic pulse had disabled most technology across one hemisphere, though thankfully the planet's rotation had indeed spared the most populated regions from the worst effects. Leora stood at the edge of one such crater, now a week after the battle. The perfectly circular depression stretched for kilometers in every direction, its surface smooth as glass where the intense heat had fused soil into a solid mass. Nothing would grow here for decades, perhaps centuries. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" She turned to find Admiral Kane standing behind her, his uniform impeccable despite the dusty conditions. It was the first time they had met in person. "A scar that will last generations," Leora replied, unable to keep a note of accusation from her voice. Kane walked to the edge and looked out over the desolation. "Yes, but a scar is better than a grave. I've seen worlds where the Vex completed their conversion process. Nothing remained, not even scars." Leora couldn't argue with that. The reports from Earth's scientific teams had confirmed her worst fears. The Vex biological process had been far more advanced than they initially realized. Without the plasma lance intervention, the entire planet would have been converted within days. "Your people call this excessive force," Kane continued, gesturing to the crater. We call it humanitarian intervention, the difference between losing a forest and losing a species. The line between the two seems very thin from where I'm standing, Leora observed. Kane nodded thoughtfully. It is. That's the burden of command, knowing when to cross that line and being willing to live with the consequences. He turned to face her directly. Your defense of this world was admirable, Colonel. Few commanders would have had the courage to authorize nuclear weapons, even facing extinction. Yet in the end, I didn't have to use them because your weapons were even more destructive. More precise, Kane corrected. Destruction with purpose, focused where needed rather than indiscriminate. That's the philosophy that drives Earth's military doctrine, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. They stood in silence for a moment, two military leaders contemplating the nature of their profession and the prices paid for security. The Earth Council has authorized an extended presence in the Thalassa system, Kane finally said. A defensive fleet will remain in orbit around Iridia, and we're establishing a joint military base in the southern hemisphere, with your council's approval, of course. Leora had expected as much. Earth rarely intervened without establishing a permanent presence afterward. Some called it imperialism. Earth called it security. Our council is grateful for Earth's assistance, she said carefully. I imagine they will welcome the protection, especially given our vulnerability to further Vex incursions. The Vex won't return to this system, Kane stated with absolute certainty. We've tracked their hive ship to the Proxima sector. Once our fleet is resupplied, we'll be pursuing them there to eliminate the threat permanently. His casual mention of continuing the fight to another star system reminded Leora of the vast disparity in their military capabilities. While Iridia struggled to defend a single planet, Earth's forces could project power across multiple systems simultaneously. Will all this destruction ever end, Admiral? She found herself asking. Or do we just keep developing more powerful weapons to face more dangerous threats? Kane considered her question seriously. In my experience, Colonel, peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of overwhelming deterrence. The galaxy isn't the peaceful place we wish it was. There are species like the Vex who cannot be reasoned with, only contained or eliminated. Earth has chosen to be the shield that protects humanity and its allies from such threats. A shield that sometimes causes its own damage, Leora noted. Yes, Kane acknowledged without defensiveness, but a necessary one nonetheless. As they walked back toward the temporary command post, Leora reflected on the events of the past week. The Vex had been defeated, her people saved, but at a cost that would be visible from orbit for generations. Was it worth it? The answer seemed obvious when considering the alternative, yet the question itself felt important to keep asking. 3 months later, Iridia was well on its way to recovery. The Earth Engineering Corps had helped restore the planet's infrastructure with remarkable efficiency, and the humanitarian ships had finally fulfilled their original mission, providing food, medicine, and technical assistance to the Iridian people. Leora stood on the balcony of the newly reconstructed government building, watching as citizens went about their daily lives in the streets below. The Earth military presence had become a common sight, uniformed personnel mingling with locals, joint patrols maintaining security, engineering teams continuing their work on defense systems. Dr. Roth joined her at the railing. The Council has ratified the defense treaty with Earth, he informed her. It passed unanimously. Even you voted for it, Leora asked, surprised. Roth had been the most vocal critic of Earth's military methods during the crisis. He smiled ruefully. Even I can recognize necessity when I see it. The galaxy is more dangerous than I wanted to believe. Better to have Earth's shield, even with its sharp edges, than to face the void alone. Leora nodded thoughtfully. Their methods still trouble me. As they should, Roth replied. The moment we become comfortable with such destruction is the moment we lose something essential about ourselves. But discomfort doesn't make them wrong. Below, a group of Earth officers were helping local workers install a new communications array. The cooperation between the two peoples had grown steadily over the months, initial wariness giving way to mutual respect. Admiral Kane is leaving tomorrow, Leora mentioned. The pursuit fleet is finally ready to track down the Vex Hive ship. Will you see him off? Yes, whatever our philosophical differences. He saved this world. That deserves recognition. The next morning, Leora stood in the spaceport as Kane prepared to board his shuttle. His flagship, the EAS Indomitable, waited in orbit, its massive form visible in the clear morning sky. Colonel Vale? Kane greeted her with a formal salute, which she returned. Iridia looks to be in good hands. As does Earth's continuing mission, she replied. I've reviewed your battle plans for the Proxima operation. Impressive, if somewhat thorough. Kane smiled at her diplomatic choice of words. The Vex won't stop with Iridia. Every world they convert adds to their biomass and technological capability. The threat must be eliminated at its source. I understand that now, Leora admitted, though I still hope for a day when such measures aren't necessary. As do I, Colonel, but until that day comes, we do what must be done. He extended his hand. It's been an honor serving alongside you. Leora took his hand firmly. Likewise, Admiral, may your hunt be successful and your return swift. As Kane's shuttle lifted off, Dr. Roth joined her on the observation platform. Another world, another battle, he mused. Does it ever end? Leora watched the shuttle ascend into the bright morning sky. Admiral Kane believes peace comes from overwhelming deterrence. Perhaps he's right. But I think true peace will only come when we learn to balance power with restraint, strength with wisdom. A difficult balance to maintain, Roth observed. Yes, Leora agreed, but worth striving for, nonetheless. The shuttle disappeared into the clouds, leaving Iridia behind. Below the observation platform, in what had once been an empty plaza, a memorial was being constructed, not just to those lost in the battle, but as a reminder of what had been sacrificed to ensure survival. At Leora's suggestion, it would incorporate soil from the crater sites, fused into glass sculptures that would catch the light of Thalassa's sun. Life would continue on Iridia, changed but unbroken. The red forests would eventually regrow around the edges of the sterile craters. The black oceans would still absorb light like a void, and the people would remember both the terror of the Vex and the salvation that came with Earth's overwhelming force. As Leora turned to leave the platform, her gaze fell on a group of children playing in a nearby park, a park that would not exist if the Vex had succeeded. Some prices, however terrible, were worth paying. Some forces, however destructive, could serve the cause of life rather than death. The key was knowing the difference and having the wisdom to choose correctly when the moment came. In the command center of her flagship, the Iridian vessel Guardian, now equipped with Earth-designed weapon systems, Leora reviewed the latest defense protocols with her officers. Jen, recently promoted to commander, pointed out improvements to their early warning systems. With these upgrades, we'll detect any incursion at least 3 days before they reach our orbit, Jen explained, and the new defensive grid can be activated remotely. Good, Leora nodded. What about the training program for our pilots? Progressing well. The Earth instructors are impressed with how quickly our people are adapting to the new fighter craft. Leora allowed herself a small smile of pride. Iridians had always been quick learners, adaptable by necessity on their harsh but beautiful world. Now that adaptability was serving them well as they integrated Earth's advanced technology into their defense forces. Colonel, a communications officer called, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Kane's fleet. Leora felt a surge of anticipation. It had been 6 months since Kane departed for the Proxima sector in pursuit of the Vex Hive ship. Put it through. The main display activated to show Kane's face, looking tired but satisfied. Colonel Vale, greetings from the edge of the Proxima sector. I thought you'd want to know. Mission accomplished. We found the Vex Hive ship and neutralized it completely. The threat to this region of space has been eliminated. A cheer went up from the command staff, quickly stifled as they remembered military decorum. Leora didn't reprimand them. The news deserved celebration. Casualties? She asked, the commander in her needing to know the cost. Lighter than expected, Kane replied. The Vex weren't prepared for our level of firepower. We lost 2 frigates and a destroyer, along with their crews. His expression darkened momentarily. Good men and women, all of them. They didn't die in vain, Leora said softly. How many worlds did they save? Kane's expression lightened somewhat. Dozens, at least. Intelligence suggests the Vex were preparing for a major expansion through this sector. Your world was just the first target. The knowledge that Iridia had been on the front line of what could have been a devastating interstellar invasion sent a chill through Leora. The destruction they had witnessed, the craters, the electromagnetic damage, the lost lives, seemed an even more acceptable price in light of what had been prevented. When will you return to Iridia? She asked. We'll be making a stop at Earth for repairs and reinforcements, but I expect to be back in your system within 2 months. The defense station at Iridia is a key strategic location now. After the transmission ended, Leora stood in silent contemplation. The partnership with Earth had fundamentally changed Iridia's place in the galaxy. From an isolated world on the periphery, they had become an important strategic outpost, part of humanity's extended defense network. The following weeks saw increased activity as Iridia prepared for the return of Earth's fleet. The defense treaty had formalized their relationship, but many details of the ongoing cooperation still needed to be worked out. Leora found herself in endless meetings with both Iridian officials and Earth representatives, hammering out agreements on everything from resource sharing to command structures. One evening, as she walked along the shore of one of Iridia's black oceans, she spotted Dr. Roth sitting on a rocky outcropping, gazing out at the horizon where the last light of day was fading. Mind if I join you? She asked, approaching. Roth gestured to the space beside him. Please do. I was just thinking about how much has changed. Leora settled onto the rock, feeling the day's tension begin to ease from her shoulders. For better or worse? Both, I suppose, Roth replied thoughtfully. We've gained security, technology, resources, but we've lost something of our independence. Our isolation protected our way of life, our values. Our isolation nearly got us exterminated, Leora reminded him gently. True enough. Roth picked up a small stone and tossed it into the dark waters, where it disappeared without a ripple, a peculiar property of Iridia's dense, oil-like oceans. I've been studying the environmental reports from the plasma lance sites. Any recovery yet? Leora asked, though she knew it was too soon to expect much. Nothing significant. The soil composition has been altered at a fundamental level, but we've detected some microbial activity at the edges, extremophiles adapting to the new conditions. He smiled faintly. Life finds a way, even in the most hostile environments. Like us, Leora observed, adapting to our new reality. Indeed. Roth turned to face her directly. The Council is considering naming you as our official liaison to Earth's military command. Given your background in both diplomacy and defense, you're the natural choice. Leora had heard rumors of the appointment but hadn't given it much thought, focused as she was on the immediate tasks of rebuilding and securing Iridia. And what do you think of that idea, Doctor? You've never been shy about expressing your opinions on military matters. Roth chuckled. No, I haven't, have I? But despite our occasional disagreements, I trust your judgment. Leora, you understand both worlds, Earth's martial pragmatism and Iridia's philosophical idealism. If anyone can find the balance between them, it's you. His confidence touched her. Throughout the crisis and its aftermath, Roth had been both her most consistent critic and her most loyal supporter, challenging her decisions while respecting her authority. I haven't decided if I'll accept the position, she admitted. Part of me wants to return to purely military duties. Command of a starship is much simpler than navigating interplanetary politics. Simpler, perhaps, but your talents would be wasted. Iridia needs someone who can speak to Earth as an equal, not as a subordinate. Roth stood, brushing dust from his clothes. Whatever you decide, you have my support. As he walked away, Leora remained by the ocean, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear. Among them was a bright, steady point of light, the Earth Defense Station in orbit around Iridia, a constant reminder of their new protectors and partners. 2 weeks later, Leora stood in the newly constructed Joint Command Center as Earth's fleet returned to Iridia. The massive ships moved into their assigned positions with practiced precision, their presence both reassuring and imposing. Admiral Kane's flagship took up station in high orbit, a silent sentinel overlooking the planet below. Leora had accepted the liaison position, recognizing the importance of having an Iridian voice in the decisions that would shape their world's future. Now she waited to welcome Kane back to the planet he had helped save. When the Admiral's shuttle landed at the spaceport, Leora was there with an honor guard of both Iridian and Earth soldiers. Kane emerged, looking refreshed after his return to Earth, and saluted the assembled troops before approaching Leora. Colonel Vale, he greeted her warmly, Iridia looks more beautiful than when I left it. The reconstruction efforts have made good progress, she agreed, gesturing toward the cityscape behind them, where new buildings stood alongside the old Earth's architectural influences already visible in some of the designs. Your engineers have been invaluable. As they walked toward the waiting transport, Kane lowered his voice. I've reviewed your reports on the integration process. Some friction between our peoples was inevitable, but overall, it seems to be proceeding well. There have been adjustments required on both sides. Leora acknowledged diplomatically. There had indeed been incidents, cultural misunderstandings, jurisdictional disputes, occasional conflicts between Earth military personnel and Iridian civilians. Nothing serious, but enough to require constant attention and mediation. Earth's Council is pleased with the partnership. Kane continued. They've authorized additional resources for the defense station and expanded trade agreements. Iridia's strategic importance has been formally recognized. And our council has ratified the final protocols for the joint command structure, Leora informed him. I'll be serving as the official Iridian liaison, working directly with your staff. Kane smiled, genuine pleasure in his expression. Excellent choice. I look forward to our collaboration. Colonel. Later that evening, a formal reception was held to celebrate the strengthened alliance between Earth and Iridia. Representatives from both worlds mingled in the grand hall of Iridia's government building, the atmosphere one of cautious optimism. Leora, dressed in her ceremonial uniform, moved through the crowd, observing the interactions with a diplomat's eye. Council leader Torin was deep in conversation with Earth's political envoy, discussing trade opportunities. Dr. Roth had gathered a group of scientists from both worlds, animatedly describing Iridia's unique ecosystem. Even Jen, normally uncomfortable in formal settings, was engaged with a group of Earth pilots, exchanging stories of aerial maneuvers and close calls. Admiral Kane approached, offering Leora a glass of Iridian wine. Your people make excellent vintners, he commented, raising his own glass in appreciation. Something to do with the mineral content of your soil, I'm told. An unexpected benefit of our unusual geology, Leora agreed, though I wonder how the plasma lance sites will affect future harvests. Kane's expression sobered. We're developing restoration techniques that might help accelerate recovery in those areas. Not a perfect solution, but better than waiting centuries for natural processes. That would be appreciated, Leora said sincerely. Those scars are constant reminders of what we faced and what we lost. And what was preserved, Kane added softly, gesturing to the gathering around them, people alive and thriving because of the decisions they had made, the actions they had taken, however destructive those actions had seemed at the time. Leora couldn't disagree. For all the damage done, the alternative would have been infinitely worse. To preservation, then, she said, raising her glass. And to partnership, Kane replied, touching his glass to hers. May it serve both our worlds well. As the reception continued into the night, Leora found herself on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights below twinkled against the backdrop of darkness, while above, stars and Earth vessels alike shone in the clear night sky. The contrast between the natural and the artificial, the ancient and the modern, struck her as an apt metaphor for Iridia's current state, balanced between its own traditions and the new influences from Earth. Kane joined her, leaning against the railing. Quite a view, he remarked. Your architects chose this site well. The building was designed to connect Earth and sky, Leora explained. Iridian philosophy sees them not as separate realms, but as different expressions of the same cosmic principles. Poetic, Kane acknowledged, though I confess, after a lifetime on starships, I've developed a pragmatic view of the cosmos. Less poetry, more physics. Perhaps we need both, Leora suggested, the practical knowledge to survive and the philosophical understanding to make survival meaningful. Kane considered this. You may be right, Colonel. Earth's history has taught us the importance of power and preparedness, but perhaps we've sometimes lost sight of why we fight in the first place. He looked out over the city. Seeing worlds like yours, unique, beautiful, worth protecting, reminds us. The sincerity in his voice surprised Leora. Despite their differences in approach, she and Kane shared a fundamental commitment to preserving life and civilization against threats like the Vex. It was a foundation they could build upon. I think we'll work well together, Admiral, she said. So do I, Colonel, so do I. 1 year after the Vex invasion, Iridia held a memorial ceremony at the largest of the plasma lance sites. The crater, still barren and glass smooth, had been transformed into a monument. Around its circumference, stone markers told the story of the battle and listed the names of those lost, both Iridians and Earth personnel, who had died defending the planet. At the center stood a striking sculpture created by artists from both worlds, a spiral of fused glass from the crater itself, rising toward the sky, symbolic of resilience and rebirth. Beneath it, a time capsule contained records of the event, to be opened by future generations as a reminder of what had been faced and overcome. Leora, now holding the rank of general and serving as commander of Iridia's expanded defense forces, stood with Admiral Kane as the memorial was dedicated. The crowd included military personnel, government officials, and ordinary citizens from both Earth and Iridia, a visible testament to the integration that had occurred over the past year. In remembering this battle, Council Leader Toran addressed the gathering. We honor not only those who fell, but also the difficult decisions made by our leaders. Decisions that, while terrible in their immediate consequences, preserved our world and our people. His gaze met Leora's briefly, an acknowledgement of the burden she had carried during those dark days. From this devastation, he continued, gesturing to the crater, we have forged a new beginning. Earth and Iridia, once separated by vast distances and different perspectives, now stand as one against the threats that would destroy us all. As the ceremony concluded, Lyora and Kane walked the perimeter of the crater. Earth scientists had begun experimental work on its edges, introducing specially engineered microorganisms designed to accelerate the restoration process. Already, small patches of vegetation, not the native red flora, but a hardier variant capable of surviving in the altered soil, had taken root. "It will never be the same," Kane observed, "but perhaps it will be something new and equally valuable." "Like our alliance," Lyora suggested. Kane nodded. "Precisely. Change isn't always what we expect or want, but sometimes it's exactly what we need." As they completed their circuit of the crater, they found Dr. Roth examining one of the new plants, carefully taking measurements and samples. He looked up as they approached. "Fascinating adaptations," he reported enthusiastically. "These engineered species are already showing signs of genetic drift, evolving to better suit local conditions. In a few generations, they may develop entirely new characteristics." "Evolution in action," Lyora remarked. "Not just biological evolution," Roth replied, straightening up. "Cultural evolution, too." He gestured toward the mixed crowd dispersing from the ceremony. "A year ago, such integration would have seemed impossible. Now it's becoming the norm." Kane looked thoughtful. "Earth has formed alliances before, but rarely with such philosophical compatibility. Usually it's merely strategic convenience. Perhaps because this time we needed each other in equal measure." Lyora suggested. "Iridia needed Earth's protection, yes, but Earth needed a reminder of what it's protecting, not just strategic positions or resources, but unique worlds and cultures worth preserving." As they made their way back toward the city, Lyora reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The distress signal sent in desperate hope. The terror of the Vex invasion, the shock of Earth's overwhelming military response, the devastation of the plasma lance, and now the gradual healing, not a return to what was, but a transformation into something new. In the command center the following day, Lyora reviewed reports from the Joint Fleet exercises. Earth and Iridian vessels had been training together, developing coordinated tactics that leveraged the strengths of both forces. Earth's overwhelming firepower and Iridia's intimate knowledge of local space conditions. "The integration is proceeding faster than expected," Jen noted, studying the performance metrics. "Our pilots are adapting well to Earth's combat doctrines. And Earth's personnel are learning from us as well," Lyora pointed out. "Their approach has become more nuanced since they arrived here." It was true. While Earth's military still maintained its fundamental philosophy of overwhelming force, there had been subtle shifts in how that force was applied. More precision, more consideration of environmental impacts, more attention to cultural factors. Small changes, perhaps, but significant ones. Later that week, Lyora attended a meeting of the Joint Strategic Command, where representatives from both worlds discussed future plans for the defense of the Thalassa system. Admiral Kane presented a proposal for expanding the early warning network to include several outer planets, creating a defensive perimeter that would detect any approaching threats long before they reached Iridia. "The installation will require significant resources," he acknowledged, "but it will provide a critical buffer zone. Any hostile force would need to fight through multiple layers of defenses before reaching populated areas." "The environmental impact on the outer planets?" Lyora asked. Kane nodded, having anticipated the question. "Minimal. We've designed the sensor arrays to be non-invasive, and power generation will use existing natural phenomena, magnetic fields, thermal vents, rather than introducing new energy sources." It was another sign of the evolving partnership, Earth adapting its military practices to accommodate Iridian environmental concerns. without compromising security. As the meeting concluded, Kane asked Leora to join him for a private discussion in his office. Once there, he activated a secure communication channel to Earth Command. "I've received new intelligence that I thought you should be aware of," he explained. "Our deep space monitoring has detected unusual activity in several neighboring sectors. Nothing conclusive yet, but the patterns are concerning." The display showed sensor readings from various star systems, highlighting energy signatures that didn't match known species or natural phenomena. "You think it's related to the Vex?" Leora asked, studying the data. "Possibly, though not directly. We destroyed their hive ship, but the Vex aren't the only hostile species in this part of the galaxy. There are others who might see the Vex incursion as an opportunity, testing our defenses, observing our responses." The implication was clear. The battle for Iridia might have been just the beginning of a larger conflict. Earth's massive military presence had likely deterred immediate threats, but the long-term security of the region remained uncertain. "What does Earth Command recommend?" Leora asked. Kane's expression was grave. "Full mobilization of the defensive network, accelerated training programs, preparation for potential multi-front engagements." He paused. "I know this isn't what your people hoped for when we formed our alliance. They wanted protection, not perpetual war footing." Leora considered his words carefully. "My people wanted survival, Admiral. Sometimes that means making difficult choices." She gestured to the data on display. "If these threats are real, we face them together, not just for Iridia's sake, but for all worlds that value freedom and life." Kane nodded, relief visible in his expression. "I was hoping you'd say that. Earth can provide the weaponry and tactical expertise, but we need allies who understand what we're fighting for, who share our commitment to preserving civilization against those who would destroy it, even when that preservation requires destruction of its own," Leora added softly, thinking of the craters that still scarred her world. "Yes," Kane acknowledged, "that's the paradox we live with. To protect life, sometimes we must take it. To preserve peace, sometimes we must wage war." As Leora left the meeting, she found Dr. Roth waiting outside, apparently aware that something significant had been discussed. "More trouble?" he asked simply. "Potentially," she replied, not elaborating on the classified details. "The galaxy remains a dangerous place." Roth sighed. "I sometimes wonder if we'll ever truly know peace, or if this is simply the nature of existence, constant vigilance, constant preparation for the next threat." "Perhaps peace isn't the absence of threats," Leora suggested, echoing Kane's words from months earlier, "but the capacity to face them without fear, knowing we have the strength and wisdom to endure." They walked together through the corridors of the Joint Command Center, passing personnel from both worlds, working side by side. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a united force. Earth's power tempered by Iridia's perspective, Iridia's idealism bolstered by Earth's pragmatism. The alliance that had begun in crisis had evolved into something neither world could have achieved alone. From the devastation of the Vex invasion and the scorched earth of the plasma lance had emerged a new understanding that sometimes what appears most destructive can ultimately serve life, that the force necessary to defeat existential threats need not betray the values it defends. As Leora looked out over her world from the command center's observation deck, she saw both the scars of battle and the signs of renewal. The craters would remain for generations, monuments to terrible choices made in desperate times. But around them, life continued, adapted, evolved. The red forests grew alongside new species. The black oceans still absorbed light like a void, yet reflected the stars at night. And above it all, the combined fleet of Earth and Iridia maintained its vigilant watch, ready to defend with overwhelming force if necessary. but equally committed to preserving what made these worlds worth defending in the first place. It was not a perfect peace, nor a guaranteed one, but it was, Lyora believed, the best they could achieve in an imperfect universe, the balance between power and restraint, between the capacity for destruction and the commitment to creation, a balance they would continue to maintain together, facing whatever challenges the stars might bring.